Aloha. I would like to open the meeting of the Committee on Environmental Management. This is our 5th session, and we're meeting here on August 1st in the Hilo chambers. With me on the council, I have Ms. Leloy to my right, to my left, Mr. Richards, Ms. Eoff, Ms. David. I believe Mr. Kanuha is in the building and will be back shortly, as will Ms. Ruggles and Mr. Chung. But we have enough people present to get started. So let's do that because we're running behind, and I really apologize to the public for that. Now, we open with public testimony, and I have to ask that everyone keep their electronic devices turned off or in silent mode. When we call you up to the mic, you have 3 minutes to give your testimony. So please be aware of that. I'm going to check with the other remote sites to see if we have anyone testifying from Kohala.
Hello, Chair. I have no testifiers for this committee.
Okay, how about Ka'u?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. We have no testifiers for your committee.
And in Pahoa?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I have no testifiers for your committee.
Thank you. And in Kona?
Good afternoon, Chair. We have one testifier here in Kona.
Okay. And we have, I'm going to just call out names. Could you please come forward and prepare to testify at the table? Kuhan Pike. Is Kuhan Pike here? Okay, she'll be back. Polikapu Deadman? Can you come forward? Oh, here. Come forward. Corey Harden. And when you speak, just turn the mic on and give us your name first, please. So we'll start with the two testifiers here in Hilo, and then we'll go over to the testifier in Kona. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Corey Harden for Sierra Club Mokuloa Group, commenting on Communication 363, the Keaukaha health impacts. There's a long history of environmental injustice in Keaukaha involving many hazards. One of them is sewage, which I'll talk about. In the late 80s, there was a large hole in the sewer outfall coming from the old treatment plant on Puhi Bay. It's now a marine lab, and the county said there wasn't any problem. So some divers went down and videotaped the sewage plume pouring out underwater while people were swimming just above. They named the video Jacques Cousteau Meets the Tidy Bowl Man and showed it to county council, and the hole was repaired. In 2014, there was another leak in the sewer outfall, and this time the Environmental Protection Agency stepped in and ordered repairs. Now in 2017, we have had sewage leaks in Puhi Bay, and we're facing a deadline 2050 to stop using cesspools. But of course, sewers are not the only alternative. Sewers mean we purify millions of gallons of water to drinking water standards. Then we contaminate it and try to treat it and dump it in the ocean. Maybe we should stop thinking of sewage as a waste and more as a resource. Then there's a lot of alternatives. There's community-level systems like low-pressure collection systems and constructed wetlands. This is, of course, best done in less rainy areas, and it's planned for Kealakehe. There are containerized package plants that recycle water, that reduces the demand for potable water and can generate income. We can get experts to help design systems through USDA Rural Utility Service grants and the UH School of Engineering and the Environmental Protection Agency, if it survives. Sewer improvement districts can be set up to spread costs out over 20 years using bonds. For smaller systems to serve one home or a few homes, there's composting toilets. I actually have one at home. There's incinerating toilets, though safety and odor can be problems. There's aerobic digesters like biofill and anaerobic digesters like biolu. In Kenya, some high schoolers developed an anaerobic digester that produces biogas for the kitchen. And there is Luwat, and that generates biogas or fertilizer. So we really need to look at alternatives to environmental injustice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha, Pali, from Petty Defense Fund. I'm speaking on Keaukaha issues. There's been a lot of problems in Keaukaha. This whole island depended on this side of the island for a long time, to the plantation time, and now to very present time. But Hawaiians have given up a lot. It's been all on their lands for the benefit of everybody else on this island. Thinking you just said you live here for 35 years, Miss O'Hara, then you should have realized, where'd you get all your gas from? Where does all your sewer go to? All you people that live in Puna and Hamakua, all bring your stuff to Keaukaha. You use all the fuel that these people got to live with. All your lives and all your industry, from auto repair to lumber to baby pampers, it's all in Hawaiian Homelands. You folks have made a great living in Hawaii off the backs of Hawaiians and their lands. Just because you got bad administration and the governor is responsible, they're not doing what they're supposed to do, looking out for the well-beings of these Hawaiian people. I thought when you say you're from Hawaiian Homes, it's like how you would treat endangered species. You got an area or habitat where you keep them so that they would be protected. I mean, wouldn't you look at Hawaiian homes like if they're 50%, then there must be some kind of unique race, and if they're all put in one area, shouldn't that be looked at as uniqueness? Not as dump place where you dump everything and store everything that's hazard? This whole island, the most hazard district in this whole island is down there. You got the airports. When you land in Hawaii, this island, you land on Hawaiian Homelands at the airport. Then you buy your Pampers on Hawaiian Homelands at the shopping center. Then you throw your waste and your sewage on Hawaiian homes for everybody in Hilo. Then you think about the lands for the security of the United States, and you're bombing up Oahualoa. I mean, how much Hawaiian land do you need for Hawaiians not to get these simple remedies that every department is responsible for? From the state to the feds to the county, you all have departments that's responsible for all of these hazards. And all I see request is not about money. It's update from all these facilities on what their evacuation plans are, what their fire hazards are, how
Please
you're going to
summarize.
how you're going to treat the people, and what do you compensate these people for. So it's not a matter of asking to me about these questions about these facilities. It should have been automatic, and it's not about costing you anything. It's just updating from all of these people. That's all the people is requesting. And that should cost you nothing but care in each department
All
in
right.
your position.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go to Kona and take the testifier from Kona.
Today we have Cherie Griffer to comment on Communication 363. State your name.
Hi, my name is Cherie Griffor, and I'm here to talk about Communication 363. The wastewater and health impacts on residents is an island-wide problem, so I'm here to talk about it in Kona also. The cruise ship emission policies, off of Auntie Terry's pamphlet she put together. The cruise ship emission policies and regulations, where does the waste go? We need a cumulative risk assessment on the toxic inventory release for our residents. There's no air monitors to test the particulates. The bog comes over from Hilo and over Saddle and sits on Hualalai, and it's so thick you can see it. What's in it? We know DU's in it. What else? We need real-time test results that are available to the public and public notification. We should know who emits the pollution into our land, air, and water. And our county sewage systems are major contributors to the unhealthy environment. This was a problem that came up at the council meetings last year. The delays are from people in those departments. Who's held accountable for these problems? Wanted to say thank you to Auntie Terry Napiahi and Simi McMichael for all your countless hours researching and exposing problems in our Big Island waters. Pine Trees has a high advisory for bacteria. It's 3 times higher than the safe level. Kahaluu has been closed a few times in the past month for high bacteria counts. Every bay along our coastline was deemed impaired by the Environmental Protection Agency. In a report done by Dr. Tracy Wagner at Hilo, it says staph thrives in warm water, and Hawaii has the highest rate of staph and MRSA infections in the nation. We need to address this because our summers keeps getting hotter and our ocean temperatures are rising. Bacteria is more prevalent in the sand where our children play. On my Facebook post, I got about 100 comments, and one lady got E. coli, and dozens of people posted about their kids getting sick. There's 2 million gallons of undisinfected wastewater going into our ocean every day at Kahaluu, 1.2 million gallons released every day at Keaukaha. Our report said in 1995 it was 1.8 million gallons released per day in Keaukaha. The temporary pit at Keaukaha is 25 years old, and you can smell it from miles away. The pump station in Kona is 20 to 30 years old, and they said, at the meeting I went to, they said this is a crisis waiting to happen. All of our TAT taxes we collect in Hawaii go to Honolulu for rail. Our monies we collect in our county need to stay here. We have our own problems to deal with. We all know wastewater and beach safety are huge problems, and we need to work to resolve this now. Our residents are surfers, fishermen, divers, cultural practitioners, paddlers, triathletes. We all eat seafood. A lot of us work on the ocean. We fish to support our families, and we all spend time at the beach. Let's work to resolve this now.
Thank you. Coming back here to Hilo, Kohan Pike is here now. If you could come forward, and John Olson, speaking to communication number 363.
I have a partner who is hard of hearing and asked also to speak. If we could go together.
Sure. John.
After.
Okay. No. Oh, go ahead.
Sure. Okay.
Is your partner signed up to speak?
Yes.
Oh.
Ray Shaken.
Oh, Ray Shaken. Okay.
Should I go first?
Just state your name.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kuhan Pak. How do I not make that happen?
I don't know. Sorry.
It maybe if I'm back here, yeah? That's good. Okay. So, good afternoon, honorable members of the council. It's nice to see you all again. I'm just here to support Terry Napeahi and Ms. Liloy and all the people of Keaukaha, because they're going through a lot, because nobody wants to have a toxic facility in their community. And I don't know if you know, I've been fighting the dairy alongside Ms. Poindexter because they've been violating EPA regulation on runoff of fecal bacteria. And I've been trying to fight the Huhonua incinerator because that will have so many much more worse emissions than coal for electricity. But that's just one toxic facility per community. I can't fathom what it's like to have 7 in your community. And it's bad enough when they're working, but what if they're not working? And what if there's leaks, explosions, different environmental violations? And that's what these people are going through. So there's no way I couldn't come today to just speak for those people. And when I heard that every bay on our island is qualifies as impaired by the EPA definition, that just like threw me for a loop. And then I heard that the MRSA levels are 3 times higher on the sand than in the water. Well, Hawaii is the place where we go to the beach. That's where we live our lives. And to ask the people of Hawaii to not go to the beach because you might get sick, and our families, it's like asking somebody from the Alps, you can't ski. It's so much a part of our identity. It's like, to have our beaches this polluted, it's like cutting off our arms and legs. So I think that the whole island is impacted by this kind of negligence to maintenance of our sewer infrastructure. But ground zero is Keaukaha, because they have so much that's not being attended to. And I'm just here to support Terry's efforts and to support her request that we become more empowered as a community so that we can demand and put in effect the kind of enforcement. And I also just want to thank the council members who are who have shown to want to take due diligence regarding our coastline, and like with the Waiopai and the parking. And let's make it right, because we have global warming. So much is cascading in on us. We have to be careful. So thank you so much. And this is my friend Ray Chaikin.
Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Mr. Chaikin, do you have something to share? Can you?
Yeah, well, I basically came here today to support Terry Napiahi's position. She and Polikapu Deadman are 2 lone voices trying to speak for the Hawaiian community in Keaukaha, and I just would like to do everything I can to urge you people not just to listen to them, but to act on the issues that they're raising, because it's a matter of life and death for some of those people, as we all know. The death rate is far higher there than it is across the whole island. So I just came here today to implore you to not just listen, but to take some action to improve the situation, because you're all capable of doing that. It's just a question of getting up and taking the moral high ground and dealing with the situation. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Olson and Ronald Fujiyoshi.
He's actually been at this longer than me.
When you're ready, just state your name in 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Ronald Fujiyoshi, and up until January 1st, I was a pastor of Ola'a First Hawaiian Church, and I'm the treasurer of Ohana Hopakele, which is concerned about the disproportionate number of Hawaiians in the prison system. I came to comment on Communique 363. Last Saturday at the Boys and Girls Club, I heard a lecture by Dr. Willie Kauai from Maui. And I should have known this, but when he said it, it really hit me. He said at the time of the overthrow in 1893, there were 40,000 Hawaiians. Then from 1895 on, sugar planters brought in Japanese labor, and the total number of Japanese brought in over the years were 125,000 Japanese. So because I'm Japanese, that's what I'm talking about. But you can just see just in terms of population, how it's moved away. So I don't know whether it's because of lack of power that you begin to put industry which has so much toxic waste in certain areas. But when you reflect back on the consequence of what is happening in Keaukaha, you can see a high level of pollution on a certain area. And then my church, the United Church of Christ, years ago did a national study of pollution in North America. And they found that the whole study showed that a large number of these pollution industries are situated in areas of people of color. And this was given to Congress and made an impact on there. And when you reflect on what you see today, I think we see something very similar. So I think it behooves all of us to try and correct the situation, and so it reflects fairness and justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, John Olson here. Disproportionate impact on a community. There is no practical excuse for what has happened in Keaukaha. Obviously, I've come in here many times on the subject of the environment. We always end up with a discussion about money. We live on a visitor industry, which is dependent upon our environment. We've put the gun in our mouth. Now the question is, are we going to pull the trigger? This continues, and we will cease to have that income when the reputation gets around where you can't drink the water, you can't breathe the air. We're done. It's just that simple. The good news is the visitor count is way up. We are into the 5th year of record visitor numbers. They just added another 30,000 seats. 2 at the Big Island, direct flights. Don't tell me we don't have the money. We need only to get the money. The economics of it is real simple. The question is, are we going to survive? And we will not survive without a healthy environment. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this one out. When they find out that you can't go into the ocean, that you can't drink the water, the next thing we're going to talk about here is the Ratlungworm Disease. None of that is good for a visitor industry. We need to figure out how we get our fair share. And I realize the state has thrown us overboard. Clear and simple. Well, all I can say to that is God blesses the child that has its own. And this body better figure out how it's going to get its own, because they have proven to us without a doubt that the state cannot be relied upon. They're up there killing themselves over a rail system. A rail system that isn't really a public transit system, it's a monument. They're into monument building. Forget about moving people. We need to figure this out, and this body is where it's going to have to start if it's going to happen. Tax increment funding. We have to get our fair share, and if the state is not going to be cooperative, it's going to have to come down to fees, which is something I hope to talk to you later about in the solid waste issue, where we go to collecting fees at point of purchase. We don't have to have our hand out to somebody else. Thank you.
Thank you both. And we have one last testifier here in Hilo. That's Susan Jarvie speaking to, Dr. Jarvie speaking to 362, Communication 362.
Good afternoon, County Council members. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And as you know, I'm Sue Jarvie, professor in College of Pharmacy, and I've been the head of the Hawaii Island Ratlungworm Working Group for the past 5 years. And we have been conducting research and education efforts on basically a shoestring budget. Many of you know Senator Keaukaha submitted SB 272 last year, and it was unanimously supported all the way through the House, all the way through the Senate. And then it got diverted at the last minute, as I'm sure many of you know. And I'm here just as a comment. I just want to make a comment that I know the Department of Health is putting efforts into education, and this is a good example. I was just handed this this afternoon. And education is no doubt very, very important. But this problem is bigger than that, and we need research as well. Safe eating is healthy eating, and wash your veggies. Very, very good advice. But washing your veggies with water does not make them safe. It makes them safer. Okay? So these larvae, these rat lungworm organisms live in water. We've had them in our lab, the infectious stage, out to 3 weeks, growing just in water. We now have a culture that when you give them a little food, we're out to 4 months. We can keep these guys alive. And so just washing your vegetables in water, especially in an area where you have such high, widespread, unregulated catchment use, where a lot of people do not have fresh, potable water to wash their vegetables in. So that's a very big problem. We need research on catchment systems, best design for catchment systems to try to block the larvae from entering into household water supplies as well as agricultural water supplies. We know people can get infected by ingesting contaminated water. We've lost a baby, at least one child, that there's no way this baby could have gotten rat lungworm other than in the bathtub. So the water issue is a really big issue, and we need to have research on that issue. Another one is that we recently looked at, examined 545 rats here in the Hilo area in our pursuit of developing a diagnostic. And we found 94% of those rats are positive for rat lungworm. That's the highest rate in the country. Our slugs, our semi-slugs, especially, over 70% of them are infected. Those are outrageously high numbers. So we really need education. Education is important, but we also need research. And we are the lab. We're right in the middle of it. We are the lab to do this. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any other public testimony or testifiers? I see none, and I will close public testimony. And we, Clerk, can you read in Communication 362?
Communication 362 requests a presentation regarding rat lung disease by representatives from the State Departments of Health and Agriculture and the University of Hawaii. From Councilmember Eileen O'Hara, dated July 12, 2017.
Do we need time to queue up a presentation, or is that all done already?
Is there going to be a motion?
Yeah, we do. Can I please have a motion to file to file Communication 362? So, Mr. Richards moved and Ms. Leloy seconded. And as for the presentation, are we ready to roll on that?
So,
hi, good afternoon. Just making sure this is not on some auto. It looks like it's on some auto presentation mode. I think I know how to do this. Hold on.
You just gotta move the arrow.
Yeah, the slides are moving. Apologies for that.
Okay.
Some technical difficulties. But anyways, my name is Jason Dela Cruz. I'm the health educator for the Department of Health. We're here today to talk about Ratlungworm disease. But there's an objective to this, certainly. It's on a kiosk mode, so it's going to change every 5 seconds. So we might just have to do not full screen.
Oh, it's not going to change. Oh, I see.
I think this is fine. Okay. Yeah, this is fine. So the objective here today, and I thank Dr. Sue Jarvie for her presentation that she did to the council earlier in May. We're not here today to do it because I think she did a thorough job on presenting the problem to you and what's currently known. What we're here today to talk about is a big objective of getting this out. And so we formed the collective outreach group with Department of Agriculture and also the College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources to develop an outreach model to get this out. We've been presenting to both open and closed groups for the last, I'd say, month and a half, and we want to continue this going. This, as was mentioned earlier, this particular problem can be very much attenuated through the use of preventive measures and changes in behaviors. It's not going to reduce everything 100%, but this largely is a problem that everyone can play a part in, just similar to the dengue outbreak. We can't get into everybody's backyard. We can't get into everybody's garden. We can't get into every supermarket. We can't get into everybody's kitchen. This has to be done at all levels, that we really need to take a responsibility. And so that's certainly where our outreach and our presentation is going. There are certain things that we as the Department of Health and Department of Agriculture and CTAR can provide and can do, but we still very much need this help. And we're probably going to reduce this quite a bit if people are aware of it, that people know that's what's against them, and things that they can do to reduce those behaviors and reduce that risk altogether. So I'm not, like I said, we're not going to go into a huge discussion of this particular disease just because I think you guys have already got it. What we do want to present to you is just, the perspectives that each respective agency brings. And I apologize, due to travel and time constraints, our representatives from Department of Agriculture, Luisa Castro, is not here today, nor is Eric Honda from our Environmental Health Division as well. So Julie and I will be kind of holding the torch for them. So certainly, scientific name of this particular disease in the nematode is Angiostrongylis cantonensis. It is a parasitic nematode, and in particular, this nematode gets into our central nervous system, and once there, it does a couple of things. Number one, there can be physical damage from that particular nematode wiggling around, whether it's in your spinal cord or brain. So that can certainly have long-term effects. But also, as those nematodes start to die off, it creates a toxic condition, and our immune system responds to that. And that's when people start, developing symptoms that they might be sick. So, certainly there is a potential for a long-term and short-term effects. And, one of the parts that I think is really crucial to this particular disease, of course, is knowing the symptoms. And so the classical symptoms of Ratlungworm disease include severe headache, stiffness of neck, tingling or painful feelings in the skin or extremities, low-grade fever, nausea and vomiting, though there also may be light sensitivity or temporary paralysis. Now, if I just told you those symptoms in particular, it could be a wide range of things. You could say, wow, you may even have dengue again. So there are a lot of factors that go into this as well. And to complicate it, some of these symptoms may not be present. You may have a few, you may have none. And so when people are experiencing this, our guidance is, of course, is to go to your medical professional. And from there, certainly we get to diagnosis. Now, the challenge with this disease, of course, is that this diagnosis is quite challenging as well. So right now, the only clear diagnostic tool readily available in the U.S. is through a lumbar puncture and a collection of the cerebrospinal fluid, which some people are not going to obviously want to do. So from our official DOH perspective and our statistics, we have just about 3 to 5 cases per 100,000 people on the Big Island. And most of the cases in the state are found on the Big Island. But those statistics only tell a small portion of the entire case threshold, because that doesn't include people who are exposed, people who are exposed who are asymptomatic, people who are exposed who have mild illness and don't go see a doctor, people who have illness and go see a doctor but don't choose to have a lumbar puncture. And then there's people who go through all of that sequence, and unfortunately, the test is not perfect, but it may not also come back positive. So there's a lot of reasons why those numbers may not accurately depict the actual true cases. But that method for collecting that data has been consistent since 2007, when Ratlungworm was made into a reportable disease by the Department of Health. And I should note that that's one of, I think, at least 86 reportable infectious diseases that the Department of Health does monitor and routinely tabulate and investigate. So certainly keeps us busy, as you can imagine. And I'm not going to go through the actual rat lungworm cycle, but it is a complicated cycle that usually cycles between the rat and a snail or slug. If it just stayed in between those organisms, it would be one thing. But unfortunately, it can hop to other organisms or transport hosts that we may consume or other animals may consume, or we may accidentally or on purpose ingest snails or slugs. And that's what we think is, certainly the primary transmission route for rat lungworm. But as I had mentioned, there are certainly possibilities for other routes of transmissions that may be possible. But, so far with the available knowledge we have, it is, certainly something that needs to be researched. And so, throughout our conversation on this, we want to acknowledge that things that we do know and also things that we don't know. And we fully support that, there needs to be more research on this topic indeed. One other thing that I find people when I do this presentation that people find very interesting is that this was a study that they did, and they collected rats throughout the Hawaii Islands as well as other islands throughout the Pacific. They caught the rats, dissected them, and then looked for definitions of either in the rat brain or the heart or the lungs for actually seeing if they can find any lesions or find the evidence of the nematode itself. So as you can see, even by this study alone, the Big Island had 39% positive infected rate. Kauai had 83%, and Oahu had 39%. I think what's most interesting, though, about this particular study it was done in 1965. And so, we have certainly had this potential for disease and this disease in our environment for quite some time. And the question is, well, are there unique circumstances that are leading to more disease detection now? Are there certain behaviors that are doing that? And so certainly there's a lot of questions that need to be answered about this topic. And one of those things that I've then identified through many of the research, through Dr. Jarvie and other research throughout the state, is that one reason may be one particular species, is the semi-slug. That certainly on this island was detected in the 2000s, but I should add was also detected on Oahu as early as 1996. And so this particular species, for whatever reason or another, they think it might be an anatomical kind of reason why, seems to have a higher positive rate for infection. So the more these you catch, the more likely they are to be positive. However, and throughout discussions, as I point out, to blame all this on one particular species is really hard, because studies have also shown that other species can harbor the disease as well, though not as much as a higher positive rate. But individual other species may actually carry a higher parasitic load. So there might be more parasites inside of it. And with a disease like rat lungworm, where it's not a virus or a bacteria that reproduces inside of the humans typically, or to our knowledge that it does, this is largely dose dependent. So the idea is the more of that infective larvae that you ingest, the more likely those worse outcomes are going to be. We don't know where that threshold is. If you get one or two, if you're going to be fine, maybe those people that are asymptomatic. But for whatever reason, this particular species is of great concern because of that higher positive rate. And I also like to tell people about studies that other researchers have done as well. So they collected snails and slugs in this study across the whole state. Those red dots are where they found positive snails or slugs, and the yellow ones are where they didn't. Certainly, and then on this particular study, they also did a habitat suitability, and that was based on precipitation and elevation and altitude. And you kind of see certainly the places of concern are, of course, East Hawaii and, not surprisingly, Hana on Maui, where we had a few cases a few months ago. And so this leads credence to believe, but when I look at this map, it also tells another story. No matter where you live, you're likely to have snails and slugs, and there's a chance that they could be infected. So I don't want people to just think about one particular species, nor about, well, that's a one region's problem, because in totality, it's really all of our problems. So from the DOH side, what we're doing currently on this, instead, in regards to outreach and education is certainly we're pushing this out with our partners and trying to get this out as much. We do have a new rat card, which we'll be distributing certainly throughout, and we've been using this for quite some time already, getting that out. But our normal activities around something like this include case identification, diagnostic testing, because that CSF sample ultimately does have to get to the Department of Health, as we're the only lab in the state that can run it. Our sanitation department is both doing retail education and handling consumer complaints. So every time I'm sure you've seen the placards now around town at every restaurant. Whenever those are put in, there's a general education done to the establishment as well, which includes now focused rat lungworm education. Our vector control is also handling abatement and case response. And so that means if there's a case that we have confirmed, that we can go out, assess the environment, and give recommendations about what to do and what to do. So that includes both rats and snails and slugs control. And of course, education, as we said, is key. So remember the reason why we're here is really to help you. We want to ask for you to help get this out. So certainly there's my contact information. They can also contact the Department of Health directly and request that. I'm hoping that some of you take this to your own effects and say next time you're holding a meeting with your constituents, please have no hesitation in inviting us to come out there. We can scale this down to as little as a half-hour presentation to much longer if needed. Usually there's lots of questions on this, so I want to make sure that it's presented in a way that acknowledges, the current understanding. At this point, I would really ask our colleague Louisa to take over because she's quite adept at this particular topic. But we do want to inform people about their options in controlling snails and slugs in their environment. Throughout our outreach, we also give just general basics in controlling rats as well. So identifying when you have a rat infestation and the current options are, because there are much more options available to individuals today rather than just the old kind of snap rat trap. So as for snails and slugs, of course, we know I wanted to point out that this particular picture, when you see that the semi-slug here, how small the eggs are and as well as how small the juveniles could be. So like I said, our primary transmission route risk is still thought to be that accidental ingestion of the whole organism that could be infected or not, and then could have an unknown level of parasites inside of it too. So we certainly do want to be on the lookout for that. And the guidance that we give certainly has multifactorial type of approach. We want to make sure that when you're bringing stuff into your property from other places, whether they be from friends or from commercial operations, you're potentially bringing things into your own home environment. So that could be in the soil, it could be on the plant. You want to eliminate desired hiding places where snails and slugs could be harboring. I found a lot of success personally by removing by hand, and then I'm able to identify it as well. It's also a great educational tool when you have small children that can allow, I bring my daughter out into the yard because I worry about her playing around with slugs or whatnot. So she becomes part of my team in my home garden that we can eliminate these guys by hand. And you do see some reduction in the numbers when you do that effectively. And then there's all sorts of barrier treatments and, of course, bait treatments as well that can have serious effects. And some of this education we do as well, way beyond the consumer as well. We did have one outreach focus in Waimea a few weeks ago with strictly that was for commercial growers. And so, part of that is also educating that community. So we are poised and able to interact with that community as well. And now I'll turn over to my colleague to discuss further about what she does on her end.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Hi, my name is Julia Z. I'm an extension agent with the University of Hawaii at Manoa College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, the Cooperative Extension Service. So in an effort to prevent foodborne illnesses, including rat lungworm disease, extension agents like myself around the state have been conducting training for farmers and producers on good agricultural practices, produce safety, and the requirements of the Federal Food Safety Modernization Act. We also educate home gardeners and consumers on safe food handling practices, including proper cleaning and preparation of fruits and vegetables. So I recently, besides our group presentations, I recently presented information on food safety and rat lungworm disease to seniors at 10 county nutrition program sites around the island. And I continue to provide this information to other consumer groups and individuals whenever possible. So the handouts that I was sharing with you today include the safe produce on how to clean different kinds of fruits and vegetables. And for us, we believe that it still, comes down to the consumer knowing what, they're bringing into the home, and, making sure that things are clean and, maybe well cooked if they're not sure if it's contaminated or not. And preventing Ratlungworm disease is another handout. And again, just carefully looking and rinsing all produce twice. So we're, with the seniors, I reminded them, make sure you have good lighting in your kitchen, put your glasses on, and, really look at what it is that you're trying to clean. And then the third handout that's really helpful for home gardeners and homeowners is managing slugs, snails, and flatworms in the home garden. And so it's just useful information that people can do in their home, in their backyards.
Yeah, so as mentioned, there's a lot of different ways that we can intersect this problem. We can do it at certainly the regulation side, and we're doing our efforts on that end. But there's a lot that can be done at the consumer level as well, and that's where we're hoping that we can get out this message as much as possible in a public education and outreach campaign, and just keep this always on the tip of some people's minds. And certainly, as she said, certainly as Julia mentioned, with washing, we want to reiterate again what Dr. Jarvie had mentioned, that this water doesn't kill this parasite, if it is in there. That washing is really to avoid to rinse off other debris or other insects or the snail or slug that's already on there. There is certainly some concern that we always get the question about slime trails and how long it's kept on there, and certainly there's a lot to be still research about this topic. But certainly considering the amount still being consumed in our island and throughout our state of local produce, and the statistics of saying, well, how many people are actually coming down with symptoms that are clinically diagnosed is still not there, and does not support that high number of people even with local produce. So that is really just a bird's eye view of what we present, and I know we kind of threw that out to you very quickly. But so far, I'm finding certainly a lot of different perspectives coming through when we do this out in the public. And, there is a lot of concern, and that's certainly warranted. And we want to be able to give out the best information possible with what we know. And certainly we want to get into every nook and cranny that we can, so everybody can make informed decisions about, how they approach their own prevention and what they do when they do get sick. And that's, I don't have anything else to add at this point. Do you, Julia?
I did want to add that, I think we're making a very concerted effort to support our local farmers. We've heard from farmers that they're, having reduced sales, hearing people not wanting to eat local produce. Some farmers are even, switching their crops so that it's, less susceptible to slugs and snails. And so we're really trying to help the local farmers also, with their livelihood, but also keeping the public safe.
All right, then. Thank you for the presentation. Really appreciated it. And I do have anyone?
I do.
With questions? Okay, Ms. Leloy.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. What is the current budget for DOH for this awareness program?
So with the House bill that was referenced earlier, there is $500,000 per year over the course of the next 2 years. The information about how that money is supposed specifically be used has still not been shared directly with the public yet, and we can certainly share that with you when it's available. However, I do think that the 3 priorities that the statewide task force, the governor put together on this, is focused on 3 things in particular. And that's going to be through outreach and education is the main component and the priority, and then also epidemiology and vector control.
Okay. And how is that, how are you guys going to measure that? We get this money,
And, I think, as an agency from the Department of Health that works across the state, I don't know if there will be earmarked funds for that entirely. I assume with any larger outreach or mainstream media kind of campaign, That may be done primarily on Oahu, and we might see it start popping up in our local theaters in an ad, or in our shopping centers on kiosks, or on radios or in newspapers. So some of those things, it's not like local. Our Department of Health on each island is given a budget. I suspect a lot of that to be done throughout the state on a consistent level. But it's really up to the work that we have here that's going to get that word out. So if that means making sure that I have enough of these, if that makes sure that we're getting into every nook and cranny and mileage is being paid and any overtime pay, if we got to work nights and do that, we'll be committed to that. So I really doubt that from the neighbor island perspective we're going to see that level of detail and have that level of control. But we should have the resources available to make sure that we're getting it out there, and that each request can be handled in a prompt manner.
Now, for those requests, are they going to be community driven, or is it going to be like DOH
I think it's
driven?
going to be.
And if you would just let me finish, just because what might work here on the Big Island, as far as community initiatives, may not work on Maui, or here on the Big Island, it might work in Hilo, but not Waimea. So
That's right. Yeah. So certainly, I think it should work both ways. So we have sought out groups in particular to say, hey, maybe we should have one there. Like we did one in Tutu's house in Waimea not too long ago. That was initiative of that. But the East Hawaii or the West Hawaii Governor's Liaison blasted our request out to all of her email list. And each group came back and said, oh, well, we want that. We want them to come out. And so I do think that it's, because we have such a diverse environment on this island, I think, a approach that does it both ways is going to really work well. Certainly on Maui, when they had a few cases, they opened it up to large-scale community meetings. I don't think that's been identified yet for the Department of Health as a thing, just because on Maui, I think it was very still fresh to a lot of people. And we could probably get a good audience doing that. On this island, I think there is some level of people aware of it, but we still want to make sure that we're getting out to whatever group. So certainly, I think both approaches are going to be very effective on our island to get all those diverse audiences.
this will be just my last question. With this awareness program, are we going to be able to identify the economic setbacks or damages to the industry, like our farmers, or maybe to our tourism industry? Or is there a way to assess that or measure that just within this awareness program and the monies allotted?
I don't know if it'll ever be as specific as that. I know that certainly the experience on Maui might be able to be shared, because I don't think it's been specifically looked at, but if a study is done to realize the impact of what it did there, just because it was such an acute problem and an acute response, that I think those numbers might be very telling. But everything so far from what I hear from farmers is more along the lines of hearsay and anecdotal. But certainly it would be nice to have that information. But it doesn't have to. Since our HANA cases went to the national media, I wouldn't be surprised if it's had some effect, certainly on that level as well.
I lied. I did have one more question. You mentioned well cooked. Is there any information about like it being ice cold? The opposite. Do we have information on that? Because we do a lot of warabi and we rinse it, but you do the cold bath. You cook it, but you steam it, and then you. Is there information about doing colder water rather than rinsing?
If
hot
anything, you would need to freeze it for like 48 hours, which would, a lot of vegetables wouldn't appreciate that. So, yeah. But our current guidelines, we're following CDC guidelines, and so we actually had that freezing as one alternate step, but we took it off, and we're recommending either very thorough washing, or if you're not sure, cooking up to 165 degrees for 15 seconds. And so it's more than just a quick stir fry. It's really cooking it pretty well. Yeah.
Hoping we get more directives on that from consensus amongst the task force for the state on that issue of freezing, because there certainly is some scientific evidence that freezing at negative 15 degrees for 24 to 48 hours does have a pretty good kill rate, and Dr. Jarvie's lab certainly has expanded on that study as well. But it's still not seen as an effective, super effective way to do it so far.
Thank you. I yield.
Anyone else? Ms. Ruggles?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask you a question about the catchment system situation. As you know, Puna's residents, a quarter of them were positive for the rat lungworm antibodies. And as we just learned from Dr. Jarvie, that it can transfer through water into any open wounds. So is it a objective of the Department of Health at all to start looking at filtration systems and guidelines for those?
Yeah, certainly water catchment and regulations are a challenge. I believe it is still not considered a potable water source from the Department of Health perspective. And on that basis alone, even washing your vegetables with catchment water, even though it may have been treated, and from my understanding, even with a proper filtration system and a UV system, you're actually doing a very extensive job of treating your water. But Department of Health still does not recognize that as a source of potable water. I'm afraid that issue would have to be looked at through that lens in order to get some advancement. However, I do think that the state task force is looking particularly at that problem, and I think we may get some guidance on there shortly in terms of what it is. But certainly that is an interesting and possible theoretical transmission route. It's hard to really, with many of the cases that through a normal epidemiological investigation, it's hard to pinpoint the exact exposure. In that time that they may have been in the bathwater, they may have also ingested water that wasn't properly treated, or they may have come in contact with something else, or they may have been in the yard and interacted with something as well. So there's also some thought that, well, what if you're weed whacking and it gets in your mouth, or what if it could also enter through your eye? There's a lot of research that still needs to be done on this topic, certainly. But for us, that primary transmission route still appears to be that accidental or intended ingestion of either a raw or undercooked snow or slug. So if certainly when the investigations start pointing to that, I do think that it's gonna certainly look into that a little bit more. But it's really hard to pinpoint that exact exposure. So from a theoretical perspective, yes, it is possible. And the Department of Health is not really set up to be a research organization per se. And so, we do look for, the best researchers from around the world to really drive that kind of our guidelines and our thoughts.
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, are you saying that rat lungworm, that it's questionable if it does transfer through water?
To my knowledge, I don't believe there's been one confirmed case from the Department of Health that has been directly attributed to exposure. Some of the people that I think have reported have claimed that, yes, it was my catchment, but like I said, it's extremely hard to know that exactly where the exposure occurred. We do know that, as mentioned, that it can live in water for some time. And with a proper filtration system, in theory, like I said, we do need to study this a little bit more. But, it should be working through it. UV system the UV light hasn't been tested at that particular power to kill the nematode, because as I've talked to some of the outfitters here, anything larger than 5 microns is not going to really be affected by a UV system. And though some literature has looked at X-ray and gamma radiation in order to inactivate them and is successful in doing so, that's kind of out of the scope of a home consumer to have that system. And so, catchment very well could be a transmission route, and considering how many people are on catchment here, if it was there might be other factors that are associated with that in terms of how much maintenance they have, what they use it for, how they use it, that may have more, more factors into it, because we have a lot of people on that are using catchment. We have a lot of people that are maintaining it well, and so I assume some people that aren't. And so if this was a huge transmission route for this particular disease, we should be seeing more cases associated with that. And I don't think the data is really supporting that right now. So
Okay.
it certainly is plausible, and that's why certainly more research is needed.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other comments from the council? Okay, then I have a few comments and questions. You've spoken a lot about the need for further research. And I have gotten a communication from our East Hawaii environmental health specialist with the DOH here. He retired yesterday. And that was a communication that was updated from an original document that CTAR put out when Trish McCumber was with CTAR on water quality and catchment systems, since they are widely used here on the Big Island, whether DOH recognizes them as potable or not. They are widely used for residential water systems. And in Trish McCumber's work, Ratlungworm disease was never mentioned. And so this was amended with 3/4 of a page about the possibility of contracting Ratlungworm disease through the use of catchment system. But it made no firm claims. It suggests that people use as small as a 5-micron filter. Most of the filters that are commonly used are 10 or 20 microns. So it was suggested that use of a 5-micron may protect you from Ratlungworm disease. But to me, that's not sufficient. If all we're doing is a public education campaign where we're passing out information that is not well researched, documented, firmly identifies ways to avoid transmission of this disease, we're not doing enough. So since you've said several times that the level of knowledge about this disease is not sufficient, we need more research. The freezing, for instance, of vegetables, and yes, it doesn't do well for most leafy greens, but a lot of people around here like to make smoothies with greens. I was in the natural fruits market. A woman had a whole basket full of beautiful kale, and I commented on how beautiful the kale was, and figuring she was probably going to be juicing it because she had a ton of it. And I said, oh, I've heard that if you freeze it for 48 hours, you can avoid being contaminated with the Ratlungworm disease, just as a heads up. And she turned around and said, I've lived here 15 years. I'm not afraid of that. So we have a lot to confront with a public education campaign. And I'm just concerned that if that's all we're doing is passing out educational materials where we still don't know the answers, it's just not enough. We need to be putting money into research. So I would like to know, of the $500,000 that the Department of Health was given for each of the next 2 years, how do we, the county council on the Big Island, where we are seeing the greatest negative health impacts from this disease, and data being what it is, I don't think that we have collected data on all of the affected cases. A lot of people never got tested. A lot of people are out there who have Ratlungworm disease who were never positively tested for it because we don't have a really good test yet. So there's so much research that needs to be done. I would like to know what we, the county council, can do to encourage expenditure of some of that funds for research. It's not enough just to spend it on public education. Can we pass a resolution to encourage, or do you want to hear individually from us as council members? How is it best to push that point? Because I'm very concerned about the lack of research dollars being directed at this problem.
I mean, I would say, unfortunately, at our pay level and our job descriptions, we don't quite get to make those decisions. But certainly, as I've said several times, I do recommend more research on this, so I have that knowledge to share as well. But in a crisis when there's certainly a lot of unknowns, that not just in a infectious disease scenario, but a lot of other crises, sometimes you do just have to take your information that you have that are best practice and use those in the time being to really try to reduce that much as well. So the one positive thing is that a lot of the things that we're doing, basic sanitation, taking care of, washing your hands, washing your fruits and veggies prior to eating, cooking to a proper temperature, eliminating rats, eliminating pests. These are things that are also going to prevent a lot of other potential infectious disease. Not having those specifics and saying, well, if you do it at this particular temperature at this particular time, would be great to have. But unfortunately, we don't quite have that yet. And I'm hoping that, with enough information, we can reduce that risk and drive people, but also acknowledge that we don't have that. So how do we actually, I don't know exactly how the council works and how, you could help influence that. But certainly, even within Department of Health, we'd certainly acknowledge that, there is certainly a great need for research on this. But the question often comes down to is like, well, what pot is that coming from? And with this particular resource, like I said, I'm not privy to that particular information, and I'm hoping to get some information soon so we can plan further as well. So I can certainly take that message forward, but as for specific actions, I'm not sure.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else from council with anything left to say? Okay, then with that, I'm going to call for a vote on the motion on the floor to file this presentation. All those in favor, please say yea. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you very much for coming in and giving us that presentation. We really appreciate it.
Could you tell us the vote, please?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was just looking around for her. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yeas. Mr. Richards is excused. He had to leave at 4:30. And Ms. Poindexter is also excused. All right, thank you very much. Okay, with that, we have communication 363.
Communication 363 requests a presentation by Terry Napiahi regarding health impacts on Keaukaha residents from Councilmember Eileen O'Hara dated July 12, 2017.
Okay, we're going to take a short recess because we have to switch up the technology. We can do it after. Okay, good to go. Okay, we're going to come out of recess here, and we need a motion to file communication 363 so we can get on with the presentation.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Leloy moves, and the second was from Ms. David? Oh, from Ms. Eoff, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, once again, I apologize for the lateness. I know you guys have been very, very patient, and we're over an hour behind time, so I really appreciate that you're all still here to hear this really important presentation by Terry Napiahi and her community who has helped put this together. So thank you, Terry. You want to proceed?
Okay. I'm ready. Thank you, council members, for hearing our presentation today. I've been excited to bring this forward to all of you and hope that we can move forward in finding remedy for our community. My first slide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Keaukaha Action Network was formed about 4.5 years ago in our Keaukaha Community Association. And we specifically moved on issues that concerned our community with our health and safety. But before I start, I want to thank those in the past that have dealt with some of the issues, like the Department of Transportation Airport, and in that time of 2003, I think it was, Patrick Havaila could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd like to thank those that had brought these issues to light, Kim Rowe and Hans Mortensen, for their efforts in the past. And also our tutus that were standing strong to deal with the issues. So just giving you a brief history that our community did stand up several times with some of the issues that were brought forward. With the airport, we've had people standing in a, I guess, human line of holding hands across of the runway was an issue. We've had my grandparents standing in front of the wastewater treatment when it was put there. So I just wanted to take that time to thank you, but move right along. So Keaukaha Action Network is there to talk about the health and safety issues. Just to give you a brief history, in 1920, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act was placed, and a lot of our people were displaced from their homes, from the overthrow, and continuing with plantation and economic opportunities as immigrants came to our island. Our people needed a place, I guess, to live after being displaced from their homes. In 1920, the first Hawaiian Homelands was organized and put together for our people. In Keaukaha, we were the first Department of Hawaiian Homelands organized for our people here in 1924. And one of the issues that were brought up during that time was, wow, these guys gave these people some really ugly places to live, rocky, pahoehoe places. And so that was a criticism with Prince Jonah Kuhio. And this is just some of the things that were mentioned at that time. And in translation, I'm just going to tell you what it says. Nowadays, those lands that were thought of as being a joke to ridicule the Hawaiian people, Hawaiians reside there and are transforming those harsh pahoehoe lands into places where plants grow heartily. Here are some lessees living happily on these pahoehoe lands, and those pahoehoe lands are being regarded as paradise for these families. And this was printed in the Kahoku o Hawaii newspaper in March of 1926. So just a brief history as to how long our people resided in this area, in the Waikea Ahupua'a area. Keaukaha Hawaiian Homelands. This is a picture of Puhi Bay. Kind of different, county has a lot of jurisdiction over some of the beaches, but this particular beach is run by the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. One of the methods I've used 4.5 years ago was a environmental justice management system. And so just wanted to let you know that I did choose a method as I move forward in my community to assess the risk, cumulative risk in our community. And it was something that I've followed since then. And cumulative risk assessments address combined risks from exposures to multiple and non-chemical stressors, and may focus on vulnerable communities or populations. So I use a ground truth method system. And I put them in 3 categories. One was to work with our community-based participatory research. So we've worked together with our leaders and some of the families in our community to let us know what they were concerned with. So I started with a health survey so that we could identify some of their concerns. EPA defines the CRA, or cumulative risk assessment, as an analysis characterizing and possible quantification of the combined risks to the health of the environment from multiple agents or stressors. The National Research Council's Committee of Improving Risk Analysis approves approaches used by the EPA proposed CRA to be defined as evaluating an array of stressors. So that is how I moved on working in Keaukaha, and that was to identify the stresses that our people were concerned about. These are some of the environmental sociology outline that I worked on, and that was human and environmental relationship, risk perception and communication, environmental movements and organizations. We worked with other organizations and presented our concerns and got some feedback from them. Corporate social responsibility, very, very important to our community, because we've identified very many toxic facilities that have not been showing their corporate social responsibility. That is important for this discussion. Environmental governance and policy, environmental inequality and justice. So one of the first methods that we used was to map our community in our neighborhood. So we've had someone, a student from the Johns Hopkins Medical School of Public Health, offer her services to help me with this endeavor. So we participated by having the initiative of getting data collection and particulate matter, or PM, monitoring. When I first started this initiative, the first thing someone said was, "Terry, this is huge. It's so huge. I mean, where do you start?" And then I approached some law firms and got some feedback on these issues. And a lot of them did come back to me and said, "You're going to have to prove your claims." So this method helped me to be able to facilitate mapping where I can indicate where these stresses are and demonstrate exposure or the poor quality of air, land, and water in our community. So water quality monitoring was an issue, and that's something that we're going to be talking about mostly in this discussion. So the goals that I've had for this environmental justice initiative was to achieve rigor, relevance, and reach by uncovering gaps in regulatory agency data, raising important air quality issues at the local scales, and providing fuel for proactive policy initiatives. At the ending, it would be that the outcomes, or then this would become an activity for community organizations trained in basic concepts in environmental health and highlighted opportunities for regulatory and policy changes. So this whole initiative was to come up with data so that I could come to you today and then ask for remedy. And I have a whole list of remedy I think that you've got in your hands. These are the facilities that I've identified: toxic release inventory facilities, DOT airport, DOT harbor, gas storage facilities, wastewater treatment, fuel burning power plants, landfill, and military. What does toxic release inventory mean? Well, just what it says: releasing inventory that is toxic. If you're asking about airport and the harbor, they house and store fuel for their vehicles, their airplanes. They receive their chemicals from the harbor, so they hold toxic release inventory. East Hawaii Hawaiian Homes. So what we did with our student was to provide a mapping or spatial analyses. And these spatial files were collected from various public information already identified. So it was not something that we made up. and I can verify where we got this information. So the green that you see here is identifying the Hawaiian Homelands on the east side. The red, the bright red, would be the facilities that we've talked about that are around our community that are in violation presently as we speak. West Hawaii, Hawaiian Homes, fuel burning facility, and DOT. Guess where they're placed? Well, this is just an idea. DOT, noise and fumes. These are some of the things that we are concerned about in our community. Just to give you some idea of what happened to our families in the past, which left them a real PTSD, I guess you could call it. Several blocks of our people were relocated after lands were deemed eminent domain, condemned, so that they could build the runway that presently takes everybody in and out of Hilo. We still have families that live along the fence line and live near the this runway. My family lives right in front of the terminal, in front of Touch and Go. So we could give you information about how it hits our families personally. DOT Harbor, every fuel on this entire island, if not in Kauai High, comes through our harbor. Every chemical comes through our harbor, and it is stored near our home. Gas storage facilities less than 300 feet away. We have gas storage companies only across of the street of our residence. And I know if you've been down in Keaukaha, you would see that right across of the street are our families that are from the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. When I say less than 300 feet, we have a natural gas ball of storage for gas, and that is less than 300 feet away from our nearest neighbors, our resident. Aloha Petroleum. Here we come with some of the issues. Some of the concerns that our families have had is the compounding impacts that have happened to our families cumulatively for decades. This administrative order was done in 2014, where they were fined $650,000 for many issues. And if you want to go over that, I can show you. But because it was so high, they closed. They offered to close their facility right across of our neighbors, not just recently, I guess. And to do remediation and to clean up is something that they had to do with the Department of Health. Helco. Helco is known to have stressors and one of the highest risk facilities for our neighbors and for our families in our neighborhood. You have a record here showing presently how the years of noncompliance to EPA standards that Helco has on them right now. Just one of the facilities. Landfill. I don't have to tell you about the landfill, but the landfill was also one that was non-compliant to EPA standards for a very long time. Very, very long time. They were also fined $350,000 for violations in the past. Now we're going into the sewage plant. This is a topo view of our sewage pipes above of Puhi Bay. The green little, thank you to Mr. William Kucharski. He provided this little topo view of picture of the facility and how they run the dye as it goes out into our ocean. And you all know that the raw sewage is no longer being treated there. It used to, but they moved it across the runway. This is the Hilo wastewater treatment's Region 9 EPA administrative order to repair to repair the pipes that are outside of Puhi Bay, and to also take care of the cracks that were on land near the recreational swimming hole. Another administrative order evidence. I just got word from EPA of their report and what they repaired. This is a picture of our wastewater systems in Hilo. You can identify where you can see where the Hilo wastewater treatment plant now resides across of the runway, but it still goes under the runway through Keaukaha Hawaiian Homes and straight to the old pipes in front of Puhi Bay. So really no changes except that you move the raw sewage stinky plant behind the runway. These are, you've seen this before, pictures of our sewer outfall on the entire island. This is a picture that was given to me by Mr. Kucharski of their repairs that they have done in the ocean and outfall in front of Puhi Bay. They had laid some sandbags on the side of the pipes, to keep it from weathering in high surfs and storms. So, impacts for sewage, hydrogen sulfide leaks, reports of illnesses after swimming at the Hilo waters, coral diseases, depletion of marine life, ecosystems not balanced, outdated fatigue systems, no emergency systems in place. And the infringement of our state constitution, Article 12, Section 7, traditional customary practices. I am a practitioner of, a subsistence practitioner. I was taught how to fish with my parents, my grandparents, and have seen the shoreline. We've eaten from the shoreline. We've seen how abundant it was before. There are particular places that we could go and catch specific fish, kole, manini. We could have gone to Lalakea and several places to get limo ele. You can't find that anymore. So how we gauge what is not available for us is what is not available for us to eat anymore. Reports of illnesses at swimming. So one of the things that I've done with going house to house was to get data from our community about their illnesses. And some of the things that I've identified was after swimming in our shoreline, some of our families finally came to report some of the symptoms that they've had, where they swam, what doctors they've seen, and they're willing to offer their doctors reports of the diagnosis. And we have several places in Keaukaha, Puhi Bay, Richardson's, Chalks, Awili, Kapoho, some places in Puna that resulted into staph and MRSA and leptospirosis. We are continuing to gather this kind of data, and we're thankful for Dr. Tracy Wigner from the University of Hawaii, who had done a study of staph and MRSA, gave us some input on this issue. And our concern with Governor Ige's signing of a bill of the conversion of cesspools to a system or septic tank. In one of our meetings, it was discussed with the Department of Health and the Department of Environmental Manager of what are their plans for the system that is going out into Puhi Bay with this idea of conversion. And it was mentioned that a lot of the conversion for cesspools, you'll see this slide, it shows the sites of cesspools just in the Hilo area. And so our question was, when the conversion is being done, where is this going to go? Is it going into our bay? That was one question. I'll let Mr. Kucharski answer that question. Potential disasters is another issue. In case there's a tsunami and hurricane, I did ask our first responders and the LAPC group, are you prepared for something like that? I mean, really fully prepared to assess an issue like this in case there was something that is damaging as a tsunami and as a hurricane? And do we have an updated evacuation plan for the county for tsunami or hurricane? Regarding the harbor, the gas storage tanks that are near to our families. Evacuation plan. These are the things that we talked about. Does Hawaii County have an updated evacuation plan for each of these toxic release inventory facilities? Should an event of a disaster occur? Are the hazmat team fully prepared to assist Keaukaha residents if a catastrophic event occurred? These are questions. Now we're down to this idea, environmental injustice. Group bears a disproportionate share of the negative environmental consequences resulting from industrial, municipal, and commercial operations or the execution of federal, state, local, and tribal programs. Is it an environmental injustice issue? I have a few maps here, Hawaii Island map of DHHL and TRR facilities on the whole entire island. You take a look at what it looks like for you. The green is DHHL. The red is where the facilities are and where they're non-compliant as we speak. And you question, our community did not create this problem. Our community receives marginal benefits. Our community bears environmental burden. This is a census that was of a Native Hawaiian population, and we did it where the facilities are and where our Native Hawaiians are. This is where you wanted me to go. What do we need from you? I passed out a handout to you, to each council. Every department in the state, DOH, DLNR, County DEM, Army Corps of Engineer, all have historical data of fines and faults, and it's been consistent. We don't need any more future data. These departments mentioned above have failed, and records show that. It's not about the future, it's about the now. What are we going to do about it now? All toxic facilities in the Homestead vicinity should have a current update on evacuation plans from these facilities, hazard plans from these facilities. We find out what their community insurance, if their insurance policies actually cover disasters and the community abutting them. The county should at least contact these facilities and get an update. Just to let you know, this information was also given to the LAPC, and I think they are also requesting civil defense getting some of this information. We should create a referendum for an ordinance on the voting ballot so everyone can participate in creating a home rule policy to address these issues. We will be working with our councilwoman, the language, and our community to introduce this ordinance that we want to become a law. And we have other remedies, and that would be litigation. I've already identified several firms that have been receiving a lot of my information, like Earth Justice, Pele Defense Fund, and we could also call EPA. We also have the support by OHA, Compliance Department. If there's any issues that I would like to ask them assistance with, they've already let me know that they would like to work with Sue and I. And just food for thought, a possible asset fund that these people could participate in. You know, these are companies that hold the highest risk in facilities amongst our families, and this is what we're asking for. So that was the end of my presentation. I think I've sent this presentation to the rest of my community. A lot of people have already viewed it. You've looked at it, so I want questions.
Thank you very much, Terry. And I'm going to look around for some questions. Ms. Lilo, you have some?
Terry, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. Thank you for providing, just a great backdrop. And then the best part of all, which is, what is the community ask? And, you've done a great job at providing the remedies, and just 3 bullet items. I actually want to focus on something else that you brought up, which is the asset fund. And just share a little bit as far as how you envision some of that coming together. I know it was actually brought up similar to that of the geothermal asset fund and some of the impacts that's happening in Puna. So could you just provide a little bit of that backdrop for the council members so they can better understand, the idea of what this asset fund, who contributes to it, and then how we get those assets back out to the community?
Well, one of the things that we were discussing for quite some time in our community is, these facilities are emitting pollution near our families. What are the compound impacts that they have? And are they responsible for any of the, for what they're doing? Their corporate social responsibility. So we looked at some of the things that we wanted to remedy, like emergency response, like monitoring systems, like, all these issues that are are initiated by this issue of pollution that is being emitted, and the risk that these companies have to our community. Not only our Hawaiians, everybody participates in this this issue. So the idea of every time we brought it up to the Department of Environmental Management, the Department of Health, a lot of the justification for not being able to be properly monitoring the waters, is because they're not fully equipped. They don't have enough employees. They're not funded enough. And, these are, so, and then, we asked at our meetings with the LEPC, are your hazmat team, civil defense, first responders fully equipped to assess a disaster? And they said no, not fully, because a lot of their equipment costs money. So here we are again about money. But we're thinking about having a clearing, all of these facilities that we identify to participate in a fund specifically for Keaukaha and Panaewa and the issues that they've had to bear compounding all of these years. So one of the questions we asked, like these fees that these facilities have had to pay, where do they go? $650,000. Where did that money go? $350,000. Where did that go? Did it come back to our community? No. It goes to a fund, right back to the feds. Shouldn't it come back to us? The families that are being having to, carry the burden of these toxic pollution. And so that was the idea of coming up with remedy for this. The asset fund, a lot of our, the members here in our chambers today are familiar with the asset fund that was created for geothermal, something on that, light. But then I was told that, who's going to be manning the funding if you were to get something like this, and that this is just food for thought.
Another follow-up question. I know for a long time the community was asking for a cumulative health study, and you mentioned it throughout your presentation during the closure of the landfill. And something I want to put on the table is, as we go through a process to close that landfill, there is going to be a need for an environmental, impact statement regarding the closure. And, for this body, when Mr. Kucharski comes forward regarding that ask for the funding for that, that would be an opportunity for this community to get that cumulative health study done at the same time. And these are the ways that this community is trying to look out for themselves and use some of the vehicles that will become available to them, just like the closure of the landfill. And so, I appreciate what Terry's doing right now, is providing this backdrop so that this body going forward, we're not just looking at a study to close the landfill. If there is an opportunity to get more data or more air quality monitors or address other needs, that would be a ripe time for those things to happen. And the communities needs it. They've carried this burden for a very long time. And as we wind down, that one particular landfill and the closure of that, we can begin to better assess, some of the environmental concerns that this community has had. Terry can go on a number of other issues, but, those are those tiny little low-hanging fruit that, I want us as a body to be mindful, because what's happening here, we're going to see in Kauai. They have a harbor there. We're going to see it in Kona with the airport there. So if there are any lessons to be learned here and how we look ahead at managing these industries, we don't have to look very far, because they all exist right here in Keaukaha. So I'm going to yield at this time.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for Terry down? Ms. Ruggles? Okay.
Thank you. I was hoping you could talk more about the home rule referendum and what exactly that looks like.
Okay, great. I was going to reiterate that. Well, it's language that could be written by, we could work with Sue regarding the above issues, just to get, say, for instance, I know that I'd rather shut them down and, move them all away, but, we're going to be feasible right now. And some of the things that we're asking right now is something that can be done immediately. And that is to ask that these facilities give an evacuation plan, because we don't have one. I did the research. I have asked our first responders, do you have an updated evacuation plan from each of these facilities that I mentioned? And they said no. And they can come back here and correct me, but in the meeting, they have maybe PGV, because the community have asked for PGVs. I don't know, because theirs was outdated since 1990. I read it. But not to have this evacuation plan in hand, county, you're the first responders. County gets to be there first if there's a disaster. I'll give you an example of BEI. When they had a leak, BEI hazmat team immediately got to the site, but by the time they got to the site, the leak went and permeated the community. Now, how do you assess something like that? They didn't even know what kind of toxins were seeping into the community. How were they going to assess letting the community know? You know, they didn't have, it was a perfect example of how to assess something like that. You know, it's constantly happening like this. I mean, we've had multiple spills and we've had multiple leaks for decades, and nothing has been done. Now we're in 2017, and we don't have an evacuation plan to county LEPC first responders and a hazard plan. Our members are right across of the street. How quick can our first responders get to the families? And just to let you all know, there's only one way out of Keaukaha. But they shut it down. During tsunami warnings, they shut down. The families cannot go out through Kalanianaole. So we've had problems with this several times. Several times we've been, in fact, the last time we've had problems, families had to go through the back, go across of the runway to get out for safety. Had we had a tsunami, we would have all died. Why? Because we had to go and wait for somebody to open the gate. You see, I mean, can you please open the gate so our people can pass? You know, these are things that should not happen. You know, so to have the language not asking, you tell the facilities, give us an updated evacuation plan, hazard plan, and do you all know that they have an insurance policy? I'm sure they do. These are gas storage companies. What kind of insurance policies do they have? And do they cover the people that are near them? What are the buffers for these facilities? Do we know what the buffers are for each chemical that is being released? I'm sure there's a rule and a reg for that. So that would be something that we'd be, talking about.
Mm-hmm. So the referendum would be mandating all of the companies along there to
yes,
come
why
up
not?
with the evacuation plan, hazard plan.
Yes.
And community insurance.
Yes.
Okay. Is that something that we would do through referendum, or can we just pass that as a body?
I got a lot more research to do just because so many of these industries are mandated by other things. So that's why I've been working with Terry for a while now. Normally these things happen when they're getting permitted, right? It would happen during a land use regulatory process. These companies have been established forever, so we have to figure out a way, to get these companies into this community fund, whether it's a change of use or, whether they're winding down like Aloha Petroleum, how do we create a safety net for these companies and get them into this program? It's a little more complex than if they were being established right now. It's going to take a little bit more time. We're still working through that, but yeah, that is the general idea.
Okay. A lot of these facilities, if you don't mind me, are supposedly grandfathered in. So I attended a workshop with NEPA and asked them that question because Helco is a fuel burning facility and probably the highest risk stressor that I'm looking at right now is the burning of fuel. And it's been burning fuel for decades. So one of the things that brought me to this issue is the high cancer morbidity rate that is in our community. And I looked at this on the people that live on the fence line alone. My thinking, my suspicion that a lot of these pollutants could be the factor of why a lot of families on my street alone, at least one family member died of cancer. So eventually what I will do is with this method that I'm using is going to encourage universities or graduate students that will help me do cancer clustering in my community. And that is a goal that I'm going to accomplish. So one of the things that we do now is to be able to fix things that need to be fixed now. You know, I mean, it is uncalled for that our county is not prepared to assess a disaster with our families. We're just lucky we didn't have something like that.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
have to
you're
interrupt
absolutely
because we have
correct.
to reboot the system or it automatically will. So we just need to take a short recess so they can reboot it.
Okay.
Okay.
No, not at all. You got me all day.